This afternoon, the man charged in the fatal shooting of a Minnesota Democratic lawmaker and her husband, along with the wounding of another Democratic lawmaker and his wife, appeared in federal court for the very first time, following a sprawling manhunt over the weekend, the largest in Minnesota's history. State attorneys charged 57-year-old Vance Bolter with first-degree murder today, among other counts. Then, in a separate 6-count complaint, the federal authorities likewise charged him with 2 counts of murder, something that could ultimately result in the death penalty. Earlier, Joe Thompson, the acting U.S. attorney for Minnesota, described Bolter's crimes.
It is no exaggeration to say that his crimes are the stuff of nightmares. Bolter stalked his victims like prey. He went to their homes, held them out as a police officer, and shot them in cold blood. Bolter planned his attack carefully. He researched his victims and their families. He used the internet and other tools to find their addresses and names, the names of their family members. He conducted surveillance of their homes and took notes about the location of their homes. He also prepared in other ways. He concealed himself as a police officer, outfitting his black SUV with police lights and a police license plate, wearing a black tactical vest and body armor, carrying a police flashlight and a handgun. And of course, he wore that hyper-realistic silicone mask as seen on the surveillance videos.
Thompson went on to use the phrase political assassination, implying it was an extension of increasingly violent political extremism in our country. And while authorities haven't yet shared what, if anything, Bolter has shared in terms of a motive, we do know who his targets were. Officials said today the suspect actually went to the homes of 4 state politicians with the intent to kill. We also know he had in his possession a list across a number of notebooks found in his car containing the names of more than 45 state and federal elected officials, including what law enforcement called abortion rights supporters. This morning, the commissioner of the Minnesota Department of Public Safety told NBC's Today that they are looking into whether or not the killing of Melissa Hortman, along with her husband Mark, is related to her work, adding this, quote, "It certainly would appear so." Tim Miller and Claire McCaskill are back with us. Claire, it's as the U.S. attorney there said, it is the nightmare scenario.
Yeah, this man, first of all, there's going to be just bundles of evidence. I don't think the outcome of this case is in much question. He deserves due process. He will get due process, but there certainly is a mountain of evidence. And the thing that you have to get to the most serious homicide case at the state level and at the federal level is this premeditation. And obviously this notebook and the care he went to pose as a police officer all goes to that. Both the state case will be first-degree murder charges. In the federal case, the only difference is in Minnesota, it's life without parole, whereas in the federal case, they have the option of the death penalty. It'll be interesting to see who ends up trying the case and where he ends up actually having this case heard. Just keep in mind, Nicole, that the Hennepin County prosecutors, there are probably at least 10 prosecutors there that have tried dozens and dozens and dozens of homicide cases. Very unusual for federal prosecutors to try homicides. The reason they have jurisdiction in this case is because he targeted people in more than one state and because he targeted elected officials trying to keep them from doing their jobs. Typically, the federal government wouldn't even have jurisdiction on a homicide case. So this will be interesting to see it play out. It's a tragedy. I think the thing that made me the most angry is Donald Trump afterwards taking the opportunity to slam Governor Walz at that moment. I mean, our instincts are to come together after a tragedy like this. That's the human instinct. What kind of person who's the leader of a country uses that moment to trash the governor of the state that has just gone through this horrific experience? It's just hard to understand this guy and why he treats people like this.
Well, I guess, Tim, I would say after 9 years, nothing should surprise any of us. On this, though, I reached out to Esther Salas, who has generously opened up her trauma and grief at having her son murdered at her home because of her job. She's a judge. There was a disgruntled litigant who came looking for her and murdered her son. And she said the rhetoric has to change, and everybody is responsible or can do something about that. What are your thoughts in the wake of this tragic, what was described in the moments after it, a political assassination?
Yeah. Two thoughts. Before I start raging at the Republican response, I do think it'd be appropriate to mention Yvette Hoffman, who's the wife of John Hoffman, who were targets of this. I believe at this point they seem likely to survive. Yvette jumped on her daughter to shield her and protect her and was shot several times by this alleged assassin. And so, you know, a lot of times in these cases, I just think it's important to mention those folks. So we're hearing about the heroes as well as the next group of people I'm going to talk about. But the response on the right to this has just been absolutely deranged. I mean, not random, you know, sometimes you have me on, Nicole, to ask me what they're saying on the random fever swamps of, you know, right-wing blogs. I'm not even talking about those folks. I mean, all the way up to Elon Musk, richest man in the world, former shadow president, two United States senators, Mike Lee and Bernie Moreno, and a bunch of other very prominent right-wing media folks are still up until this moment trying to claim that this person is a Marxist. They invented some rationale that I guess one of the victims had voted against something that Tim Walz was pushing through with regards to health care for undocumented immigrants or something. And so they were accusing Tim Walz. Even Mike Lee, a U.S. Senator Mike Lee, was kind of obliquely accusing Tim Walz of this and then directly accusing Marxism of this. I mean, this is like a deep brain rot, and it is infecting all of their followers. It's infecting people all around the country. And at a moment where, as Claire said, you know, we should be trying to bring people together and tamp down the rhetoric, what they're doing is inciting people more. And at a moment where Democratic legislators were targeted and in one case killed by an assassin, these very influential people, elected senators, top advisors to the president, richest man in the world, are all out there trying to say, no, it's actually far left people that are doing this type of violence, and that and kind of implying that that is radicalizing people more towards the victims. So I know it's been really kind of disheartening to watch all of that because it's absolutely, and it's crazy, but it also is, it's dangerous.